Welcome to We Build Academy. So we're putting together a series of shorts, which we take the best of the best and distill it down into a short 10-minute episode. So in this short, we're talking to Elrond, who is a Passivhaus designer, and we talk a lot more about Passivhaus and how you achieve Passivhaus. So if you're interested in Passivhaus, please check out this short.
My name's Elrond Burrell. I am an architect and certified Passivhaus designer.
How did you get introduced to Passivhaus?
I've been an architect for a few years that the practice discovered the Passivhaus standard, and then that really kind of became a point of focus and point of passion for me in my work. And so I put a line in the sand and said, I'm only going to do high performance design, so either certified Passivhaus or very close to that.
In a nutshell, what is Passivhaus?
The thing about Passivhaus design is it's a performance standard, so you use the very specific local climate data for where you are, and that determines then what you need to do for your designs.
How do people typically get into Passivhaus?
People that are thinking of building their own house and kind of research and come across Passivhaus get very passionate and very proactive about it, because they kind of just discover what all the benefits are. And most people have lived in a house which is a bit drafty or gets a bit of condensation or a bit of mold or things. And just discovering that there's actually a way of designing a building that totally eliminates all of that and only requires like a tiny amount of heating to keep it warm during the winter, or no cooling, or maybe a tiny amount of cooling in summer to keep it comfortable. Is, most people when they're building their own house, that's kind of like they assume that if they get someone to design a house, that's probably what they're going to get, and then they're they're a bit shocked when they realise it's not the typical, and so if they find the Passivhaus standard, then they're all over it. That's what they want.
What are the key differences?
It is more expensive than other building forms. So in England, you're putting in triple glazing rather than double glazing, and you're also putting in a whole house balanced ventilation system with heat recovery, which typical builds didn't traditionally have a ventilation system in them. They might have had some extract fans, but otherwise people expect to just rely on opening windows and doors. And so these things cost more than not buying them or not having them. But if you're focused very much on achieving Passivhaus, then you can prioritize your budget to make sure those are just part of what you're paying for.
When would you not achieve Passivhaus?
Got some other priorities, like you're really trying to do something particular, or you want to really have some big windows and lots of huge sweeping views, and you're prepared to kind of sacrifice some of the comfort or the energy aspects of Passivhaus, then some people make a choice not to go all the way to certified Passivhaus. And
how does Passivhaus help you with your design?
Really powerful about Passivhaus design is that you can do really detailed, accurate modeling of the design as you're doing the design, so that it's a really good design tool, because you can see as you design it, you can see which windows are losing heat or gaining heat. You can see where the energy is being lost and gained. And so if you're making a choice around, how much you want to spend on a project, or how much you want to spend on keeping your house warm later when you've built it, you can make some really good informed decisions in that process.
In your opinion, what is the main advantage for achieving Passivhaus?
So personally, as an architect, I always advocate people go for full certified Passivhaus, because it's just such an incredibly good quality assurance. But if people, for one reason or other, aren't quite able to do that, or that's not what they want to pursue, then if they still go down the Passivhaus design route, they can make really good, intelligent decisions as they go along.
What is the first step to Passivhaus?
The first step is that you find an architect that is also qualified as a Passivhaus designer.
How does it affect the design process?
The kind of core intention is to have a really closely integrated design process, so that it's not adding something onto the process. It just is the way the building is designed, so it works inherently to that level. They should have built up quite a detailed model in the Passivhaus planning package, and at that point you want to get the Passivhaus building certifier involved also. And so they take the architect's drawings and they take the Passivhaus planning package file, and they do a review of that, and they just go through it very carefully and very thoroughly, and just an external, kind of independent review to make sure that there's not anything being missed or any kind of assumptions, or just, it's very easy for something to be in there that having a third pair of eyes looking over it can pick out that somebody who's really close to the project might not.
Does Passivhaus change procurement?
Procure the projects when you get a contractor or builder involved. You probably want to get the Passivhaus designer involved in the tendering process or the interview process, just to ask some kind of pertinent questions about the contractor.
Once on site, what does the contractor have to do differently?
And the contractor has a kind of checklist they work with while they're building it, and they need to take photographs and record what materials are coming to site to make sure that like the insulation is what's been specified. It's people are quite often surprised, but actually, you specify something on the drawings and the documentation, and then there's a cheap deal or something going on, and some insulation turns up on site that's really not what's specified.
Yeah. When do you start pressure testing?
And then when the building's getting closed up, so when you've got the shell, the walls, the roof, the floor, the windows and doors all in, as early as possible after that stage, you do a first blower door test. So this is just it's really closing off the front entrance door, putting a fan in it, pressurizing the building up to 50 pascals, which is, like having a 20-mile-an-hour wind blowing against the house, and then depressurizing it to the same 50 pascals. And this is really just checking the integrity of the building envelope. A couple of reasons why that's really important. One is that letting uncontrolled air move in and out of the building fabric is a source of energy loss. So the heat you put in the building will go out that small gap. And because of just the laws of physics, that if everything's quite well insulated but you've got a small gap, there's a disproportionate amount of energy goes out that small gap. And the other key thing about that is that warm air from the inside moving through a gap to the cold outside when it's winter is taking the internal moisture out with it. So that moisture is likely to condense inside the building construction. So that could cause later degradation of the building structure. And the third aspect to it is comfort. And so if you've got an area we've got air leakage moving through the building fabric, then you're going to get a colder temperature there. And so you end up getting a cold spot or cold drafts or things like that.
When do you do the final pressure test?
The final test, when the building is complete, could be just before the owners move in, or could even be after the owners move in. And at that point, the figure from that measure is what's used in the Passivhaus certification. And at that point, the Passivhaus planning package model, all the drawings, all the photographs of sites, and kind of declaration that the builder signs off to say, I've built it all according to the drawing. All that gets packaged off and sent to the building certifier, and they do their final check on that. And if that's all good, then you get a certificate.
What is the main value of the certificate?
I mean, the certificate at the end is just a kind of icing on the cake, really, because it's you're not doing it to get the piece of paper, you're doing it to get the quality building. And the piece of paper is just a demonstration that it has been checked. And that it really is saying that instead of doing the minimum we can get away with, let's do the best that we can achieve, and providing the tools and the kind of methodology to do that.
What would be your top tip for a great project?
I think it really comes down a lot to communication. And that's partly about everybody who's working on it understanding what the kind of critical path things are. So it's like, if you're doing Passivhaus, the builder, and everyone involved, subcontractors, all need to know about airtightness. It's just like really super critical because it comes down to the quality of the work they're doing. But not just that, it's kind of, an architect's set of drawings are effectively how the architect and the owner communicate with a builder what they want them to build for them. And so it's really, really super important that those drawings communicate really clearly and really thoroughly every aspect of what's going to be built.
What is your top tip for achieving Passivhaus?
Well, I would say that the key thing to keep in mind is that Passivhaus, or any kind of high-performance design, is really about integrated design. It's really about thinking about the building form, the building shape, the kind of way it's constructed, the services, all those things being part of the design. Because sustainable design gets a bit of a reputation for kind of adding things on afterwards. You should design something and add some sustainable features. So Passivhaus and high-performance design is not at all like that. It's really about an integrated design approach and making sure that the building is inherently going to perform very well.
Aaron, thank you for your time. What would be the best way for someone to get in contact with you?
Well, I've got two websites. So my business website is called VIA Architecture, so via-architecture.net. And the other website is my blog, actually, which is called Passivhaus in Plain English. And that's just elrondburrell.com.
I hope you enjoyed that short with Elrond. If you did, please make sure you check out his full-length episode. You can get access to it by clicking the link down below, or visit our main website, webuildacademy.com. We've also put together a set of show notes, and in there we'll put a link to his main resource page. His main resource page is probably one of the best resource pages for Passivhaus, so check that out. And also he has a blog where he actually explains Passivhaus in plain, simple English, so it's a great first step for you to go to if you are thinking about Passivhaus.
Thank you for listening to the We Build Academy podcast. Don't forget to click subscribe and check out our website, webuildacademy.com, for more great tools and information to help you build your dream home.